Hello to all you 3D artists out there. My name is Dustin Nelson and I'm the creator of the Rapid Rig tools. In this video I'm going to go through the Rapid Rig Modular 2.0 new features. So Rapid Rig Modular 2.0 is something I've been working on for the past few months, and I've been updating it with a lot of user feedback, and I'm going to sort of go through some of that, and there's been a lot of bug fixes, a lot of changes, so this video is just to kind of show what's new. I'll skip over kind of everything that's already there, but I just want to walk through and show you all the great stuff that's been added. The first thing I want to show you is when you create a template rig, you now have the option to set a custom prefix, and this will be applied to your final rig. So these were the defaults before. If I wanted, I could use left and right, or any custom prefix I want. So now when I generate my rig, you can see that anything that has a left and right side has left and right. Now, rather than position this to fit, I'm just going to delete this and load in my own setup that is already built to fit the character. So there's not too much difference. One thing that has changed is the appearance of some of the proxies. So for example, the spine or vertebrae type proxy has a new sort of shape just to help you decide which way should be your up direction. So this should be your up, this should be your sides, and this should sort of be the back of the vertebrae or whatever it is you're positioning. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and build the rig. Now, there's a bunch of new tabs here, so I'll go through each one, but in the Generate tab, there's now an option to add a custom prefix. So before you had to have one. Mainly this was because people would build rigs, multiple rigs in the same scene, so you need to have unique names for everything. If you're in a production environment where you're using file referencing, you don't have to give custom prefixes, but if you do want to have multiple characters in one scene without referencing, you will have to add a custom prefix. So I'll just leave this off with the new setting, and I'll generate my rig. Okay, now that the rig is generated, I have the option, same as before, to create my single joint hierarchy. So just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to create one, so I'll choose yes. This is a new option, so how would you like your joints to be oriented? So by default, or before, joints were frozen, so the rotations were frozen in. However, if you're using this in game engines, some game engines don't have the joint orient attribute pass through, which can kind of mess up the way your joints look. So if that's the case, where you don't have that attribute in your engine, you can preserve the joint rotations. Okay, so here we have the final rig built. I'm not going to work with my single hierarchy joint chains. I'll just work with the regular ones. Again, it's not recommended that you build that unless it is specific for games, just because it's the extra joints in your scene, and they don't work necessarily as well, don't handle scaling as well, just because it's a single hierarchy. Okay, so here's my rig, and I'm ready to skin it. So I'm going to select my mesh. This is everything that needs to be skinned. And I can now use the Shift key to select skinning joints. So I don't have to select the joints first, and I'll just choose standard. Okay, so here's my rig, ready to go. Select my joints. So I'm going to just do a quick bind here. And I'll allow multiple bind poses. And 5 should be good. I got up this to 6. So I'm just going to use kind of the basic here, and I'll bind it. Okay, I'm going to do a quick pass on the skinning just to clean up some of the deformation, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so now that I've done my quick pass on skinning here, I'm going to show you some of the updates to the control rig. So let's start with the feet here. So on the feet there are quite a few new attributes, and they've been renamed as well. So there's lots more pivots. So we have the toe pivot, the ball pivot, heel pivot. And then for most of those, we also have a roll, so we can lift up and down. Do the same with the toe, heel to toe. And we can bank the foot in and out. Now, all these are mirrored, so if you're banking in and out, that will be mirrored. If you're doing a toe pivot, mirrored as well. And then we also have, in addition to those custom attributes, this control is new. So you're able to rotate the ball here. Now, the reason for this is this way you can, if you had the character leaning to one side or had his foot over this way, it might look a little bit more natural to go in here and just, angle the foot a little bit with that control. Now if you find that this is a little too cluttered, what you can do is you can turn off the sub controls. So if I turn that off, now it's just the sliders, so you just have these attributes to work with. There's also a pivot control. So let's say you needed the foot to pivot from a very specific position. You can move this around and rock the foot around whatever specific angle you need it to go. And you can just move that around to any part of the foot, and it would pivot the foot from that location. That's hidden by default. What else we got here? So the other one that's really new and pretty awesome is the soft IK. So if I have my characters, let me just zero out everything here. Okay, so this is a pretty common issue in animation, is when you straighten the leg, you get that pop in the leg. So you can see just bam, it just locks right in there. So in the past, how you could get around this was in your settings, if you're in FK, you could have this always appear visible, the FK control. And so now if I'm back in IK and I have some popping happening, I could just go in and move this down just a little bit to even that out. Now though, there's this soft IK attribute, or dampen softness. So as you move the leg down, you get that pop. And what the dampen softness does is it allows a bit of bend, so it moves the foot off the pivot, and the more you do, the more it will dampen. So with a value of like 3, this is relative to the length of your leg, so you can see as I come down, it doesn't pop. Now if that's too much, I can turn it down a bit to maybe like a value of like 1.5 or something, and there it's a little bit less. If you want it to be like really soft, you can really crank out that value, and then it just never really goes all the way straight. So this is a value you can key and customize to however you feel. So really useful. Okay, what else? Let's go on to the arm. So in FK and in most of the modules now, we have mirrored behavior. So this is probably the biggest thing that people are asking for, and I totally agree that it's pretty important. Now if you grab both sides and you rotate them together with your rotate tool set to object space, you get that mirrored behavior automatically now. So that took a bit of work, but it's finally there. So this happens with all modules. So this is the FK and the legs. If I grab all the controls and the fingers and I rotate these, this is also mirrored as well. So there you go. Pretty useful stuff. All right, and a lot of animators have different preferences. So some animators like to have the controls for FK on arms and legs to be more of like a volume rather than a circle. So if I grab both the controls for the arm here, I can set the volume appearance to 1. And now I can select any part of this and rotate that. So if that's kind of your preference, you can set that. By default, those are off, but you can turn those on. And in the hands, there's quite a bit of new stuff going on here too. So we have this one common control that has everything, and it has some new attributes. So we have like a curl, a lean, and a lengthen for like squashy, stretchy stuff. Now the weights are just kind of temporary, but you get the idea. Now, in my character, I gave him these like extra joints in the hand here. So let me just turn those on just so you can see. So there's all these joints in here, and those rotate because they're all part of that FK chain. So what you can do is you can modify how much these attributes affect. So for example, if I look at the curl, right, it's curling all of these. So these ones here, these first row, these joint ones, I can reduce the influence. I could turn it right off, and now the curl doesn't affect those at all, or maybe I could leave just a little bit on. And now those bend a little bit. Now the ends of the fingers are also being affected, so I could turn that off. And this same attribute, this joint influence, affects the leans as well. So So you can lean the fingers one way or the other, and you can lengthen as well. And then on each one of these controls, they also have a lot of those same attributes. So I can go in and I can twist the fingers. Again, I can go in and reduce the influence of these attributes so that the first joint doesn't actually affect. So if I do like a curl here, right, and you can see the difference when I add the other joint there. So that's pretty useful. And then we also have the bend attributes. You can bend each row of the fingers separately if you like. And then in IK, so here I'm in IK mode. This control I've made into a box, so it's a little smaller, a little less invasive into the seam, so it takes up a little less real estate. And just like the foot, there's also a pivot control. So if I needed to have the character's hand sort of rotate from the side of his hand, say you had it on a table or something, I can position this here and then rotate his hand around that pivot. So pretty useful for locking down a character's body parts at certain places. And same with the legs, so we get that pop, so I can go in and use that dampen softness, and now I won't get as much of a pop in the arm there. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is the rebuild. So when you have a character, and let's say you needed to make a change to something in the character, like you needed to update the positions of some of the proxies or something like that, you have this rebuild rig. Now what this will do is it will delete your current rig and build a new one based on your custom, or based on any changes you make. Now before you had to delete the rig, rebuild it, now it's all one step, and additionally to that you can preserve current skinning weights. So this was in a recent update, but I've gone in and fleshed this out a bit more, so it's a bit more stable, it should work a lot better. So what you could do is, I have my character here, and let's say I wanted to go back to the proxy rig. So you need a proxy rig in your scene. So I'm going to turn off my control layer here, and joints, and maybe I'll just turn off my mesh for now. Okay. So let's say in here I wanted to make some sort of a change or needed to add a joint. Let's say I wanted to add more joints in the spine. So what I could do is go in here, load in the spine, adjust the number of joints, and let's say I want 6. I'll apply that edit. Now I get these additional joints. And so if I go back to here and turn on my control rig, and I have these options, so I can override the current single hierarchy if I want to change it from what it was before. I can preserve the current skinning, which is what I want to do, otherwise I have to reskin my character. And I can also reuse current control shapes. So let's say I made some changes to the shapes, I like made them larger or smaller, I could preserve that as well. So it'll load in, and if you swapped out shapes as well and put in new ones, it'll keep those as well. I'm going to leave this off. Now if you have both these options on, it takes a lot longer to rebuild your rig. If you have neither of these on, it's pretty quick. So I'm just going to leave preserve current skinning, and I'm going to let this run. Okay, and I also have this option if I want to delete all the extra history, if there is any on the character. Sometimes if you're, depending on how you set up your character, you may want to get rid of it. I'm just going to go with the safe route and choose no. Okay, so my rig has been rebuilt, and if I go in and I start testing out the deformations, the weights are reloaded on. So it does take a few minutes for it to rebuild the rig, but it's far less painful than having to delete everything and reference in a character or do whatever. All you have to do is just rebuild it, go for a coffee, come back, and you should be good when you hit the options that you need. So now that I have this, I probably would need to go in and update the weights, because these lower joints, the additional joints, aren't going to work properly just because they weren't there before. But that's fine. Okay, so in the control settings, there's a few things here. So this is the old stuff, resizing, changing the color. But what's new is this being able to set a rest pose for your character. So what a rest pose is, well, I have this character who is built in an A pose. And as an animator, if I'm working in IK especially, so I'm going to switch back to IK here, I probably want to be able to animate the hand such that when I go up, so if I were to grab, the hips and the root, they would both move up together, but you can see they don't really do that. And that's just because of the different rotations by default. So these are the default rotations when you build the character. So what you can do is you can apply world space rotation to your object if you want, or rotate it manually, and then you can record the rest pose. So I'll do this for the FK. Okay, so let's say I wanted the arms to be completely straight and have those be the default values. So if I apply the world space using X as my up and Y, or sorry, X will follow X, Y will follow Y, so that will rotate that like that. And if I do the other side, I would want to do negative Y so that it pops up correctly. So the other ones are okay, probably. They should be okay. And now it has this rotation. So as an animator, anytime you zero it out, you probably want it to go back to this pose. But when I zero that out, it goes to that pose. So what I can do is I can say record this rest pose. Now I could manually rotate it to whatever value I want. Like if I wanted the rest pose to be here, I can record that as well. But by having this here, it just helps you position it the way you want. So I have it here, and I can just go in and say, I can apply to all, or I can just select the ones that I affected, so it's quicker. And I'll say record rest pose. And when I do that, you can see that it zeroed out those rotations at that position. So anytime I put it back to 0, those will go there. Now let's say I wanted the elbow to always be bent for some reason. I could record that as the rest pose, and now that's the 0 value. If I want to go back to the bind pose, all I have to do is select a control on the rig, and I can say set rig to bind pose, and it will pop back. And I can always set it back to the rest pose, which is there. And if I want, I can go back here, set this to 0, and say record rest pose for that, and then put it back to the rest pose, and now it's back there again. So I could do the same thing for my IK. So if I switch this to IK, and what I'll do is I'll just match it to this. So I can use my UI, and I can just say match the IK to FK for both arms. And now I can grab these controls, and actually these I can rotate to set to world as well. So back in here, I'll just say positive and positive. And then I can record the rest pose for these guys. And so now that's the zeroed out value. So this will make animation a little bit easier. This way you can define where you want the character to be. And at any point I can go back to the bind pose and position it whatever I need. If I need to add more influence or paint weights from here, I can. If you rebuild the rig, it also rebuilds with the rest pose that you had before. Okay, so next up is the joint settings. So this is more or less the same. The only thing that's changed is I've improved some of the settings in here, so it's a little more stable, works a little better. And I've also kind of created, it's a little bit easier to understand by positioning like this. Before it was a bunch of buttons and rows. So for this I need my single hierarchy joints. So I'm going to turn off my other joints here. And so if I grab, say, my spine here, I can click spine. And this will rename all the spine joints to conform to the motion builder or human IK naming convention. I can do the same thing for the neck. I'll get the neck, then I can do the head. Do the arms. So that'd be left arm and right arm. So now all these joints are named how you'd sort of expect them to be. Okay, and then in the wrist, so that gets named wrist. That's fine. Now, for each of these fingers here, I want to select these in order that I want them to be renamed, like say left fingers. And I have this option to set the metacarpal. So when you're applying names in Human IK or in Motion Builder, if you want, you have the option to call the first joint the in joint, which I will, because I have those. If I didn't have that, I would say no, but I'll use yes. And so now I have left hand in index and left hand index 1, 2, 3, and so on. It's pretty straightforward. And then in the extras tab, same thing that was there before. And if you have any questions, you can email me, dustin@rapidrig.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope everyone gets a lot of benefit out of these new features that are in the rig. Thanks.